Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Last Week in BookTube. This is a feature on this channel that I'm reviving in 2020, where I look back on the previous week of my viewing on YouTube and tell you about odds and ends, bits and pieces, highlights, and things that I don't want you to miss. It's not by any means meant to be comprehensive. I watch a lot of BookTube and a lot of YouTube. It's on basically all the time when I'm working, and I'm working all the time. So you know, this isn't as the saying goes, this is not a popularity contest, and there are going to be a lot of great videos that I don't mention that are nevertheless great. There's just a few things that I want to bring to your attention that struck me or that I thought were comment worthy, and I will try to remember to leave links to everything down below, and we'll go in concentric circles. So we'll start with BookTube, and then we'll go to YouTube, and then we'll go to the broader world. And for BookTube, there are a number of subcategories that we want to look at here. And the first one, of course, is Maybe Midrash. That's a BookTube event that I am actually hosting, along with Felicia at Little Prairie Library and Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse, where we are talking about the many, many intersections of religion with literature, and with all kinds of other arts, and positive and negative, and fiction and nonfiction. And Maybe Midrash is a lot of fun. I love it. I have an enormous number of books that would fit that category in my collection. I was doing a read-along of first fiction and then nonfiction in the month. And it was my perception anyway, I might be wrong about this, but it looked to me like Maybe Midrash really took off in the last week. And where discussion videos started popping up everywhere, instead of people just talking about individual books. And I think that was the thing that made it take off, was that suddenly here at the home stretch before we finish out for the month, people started talking about religion, not even necessarily anchored to any book. And that has caused some wonderful videos to happen. The first example of it was Lukash at Totally Pretentious, who did a video on the spectrum of belief from atheism to agnosticism to full-blown belief in religion, in gods. And his video sparked a wonderful and ongoing discussion in his comments field that was just terrific, just a perfect example of an interested, passionate, civil discussion on a very personal subject, the kind of subject that almost invariably causes arguments and fights in areas outside our little corner of BookTube. And there were others. There have been many, many sort of quasi-tangential responses to that video. I made one myself. One of them was Matthew at Mayberry Book Club, who did a video defending the concept of agnosticism. Because in the response video that I made, I said that agnosticism is a category without any contents. It's a distinction without a difference. You either believe in gods or you don't. And if you don't believe in gods, you're an atheist. You don't have to. The form of your disbelief in gods does not have to take the form of you directly asserting as a factual thing that there aren't any gods. It only has to be the absence of belief. That's all. That's what the word means. If you have that absence of belief, which by definition agnostics do, then you are an atheist. But the idea, the definition of agnostics, well, I'm just going to let this wait, it isn't helpful to me at all. And Lukash's follow-up video pairing that somehow with that atheism and theism must properly be compared with agnosticism and Gnosticism, that just shows that somewhere along the lines philosopher got a hold of Lukash, because that's just nonsense. The danger of these kinds of videos, these kinds of discussions about religion, is that they can quickly verge into philosophy, which automatically brands them as useless and nonsensical. If you don't believe in gods, you're an atheist. That's just what the word means. But the capper of all, the crowning video for me, so far anyway, has been Jason at Byways and Bookland, who did a long video on faith on his own channel. And it's wonderful. It's 45 minutes of your time, but it is wonderful as a discussion of faith and suffering and comfort, and also a very useful distinction. Some very useful distinctions are made in this video that are perfect for diffusing argument and bitterness. It's probably typical that we find that particular thing on Jason's channel, but it is wonderful. I strongly urge you to watch it. I wish that I could report that the comments field on the religion discussion video that I made was all berries and caviar, but it is not. Unfortunately, it is not. Some people took to that comments field to be nuts, to be lunatics. Some people took to that comments field to windily pontificate, and in one particular case, lead me gently through the steps of the comment leaver's argument. Try thinking of it this way. Nice and slow. Okay, and now that you've done that, you're ready to go on to the next step. For all the world, as if I weren't, I would be willing to bet 35 years older than the person who left the comment. and I don't know what impression you're getting from these videos, but do I strike you as a child? And that is an example of the thing that this subject tends to do to people. Because I'm sure that the person who left that comment had no idea how unbelievably condescending they were being. And that plus the crazy comments meant that my own comments field was, I think, a little more reflective of discussions of religion in the normal world. Best to stick to the comments on Lukash's video. But that was maybe Midrash, and maybe Midrash is not done yet. It's got time left in it. But then we'll move on. Another subheading here would be new channels. I found a bunch of new channels in the last week, but two that I wanted to leave a link and bring to your attention. One is Scott at Shelfware. Finally decided to just break down and make it a channel of his own, just going to talk about books. And that is what you want. There is no contest here for production values, no contest for glitter or fairy lights, no points for zooming onto camera saying, hey guys! No points for any of that. Just turn on a camera and talk about books. If you don't like the end result, you can delete it. But I think you will. You'll like not only the end result of the video, but the end result of the community that you find. And the other one is Dario at the Motley Reader, who's they both have a tiny handful of videos to their name, but they're both, I think, naturals at the subject. And then we can talk about a few review type videos. I am a book reviewer, of course, so I look for review type videos. The first of those that I want to mention is David at the Poptimist, who reviews Lawrence Wright's new book, The End of October, which we've seen on this channel, and which is one of the most stunning examples of lucky or maybe unlucky timing that you could possibly imagine in the publishing world, because The End of October, which, keep in mind, was written a year ago or more, is about a worldwide SARS-like pandemic and what would happen in the world if such a pandemic struck. And the book is coming out in the middle, while the world is in the middle of exactly that kind of pandemic. Eerie, absolutely eerie. And the predictions go on from there. The prediction that David's video is basically a scorecard of what the book guesses versus reality. And he could have gone on. He could have gone on in more detail, like, for instance, a freakish snowstorm on the eastern seacoast in May. How specific is that that should be in the end of October when it happened in reality? And on and on and on. I'll leave a link to the Poptimist review, and I'll also, just in case you're interested, I wrote a review of the book myself. I'll leave a link to that as well. And the guys at Codex Cantina launched an in-depth discussion of Rashomon, which kind of surprised me, to tell you the truth, considering what the type of book that a lot of their in-depth discussions have been about. I was amazed, but I loved it. Actually, and that is a little bit misleading for me to say, because I love their discussion videos anyway, even when they're discussing books that I think are best used as fertilizer for the garden that I would have made out in my patch of ground if it weren't freezing cold and dark as twilight here in Boston, literally forever. It is never going to warm up here. But nevertheless, I love those discussion videos even when I thought the books were unworthy, and of course I don't think Rashomon is unworthy, so it's even more fascinating. And they have a way about them for discussing books, so that's not easy to do. I've shared a microphone with co-hosts in other venues in the distant past, and finding the right chemistry there is not always easy. And also, Hypeword SFF did a really interesting video. I wonder what you'll make of it, where he looks at dystopian science fiction and fantasy. A common roundup theme, but he does a really good job, so I will link that down below. And then the last BookTube category is just BookTube Bliss, just stuff that doesn't fit readily into any kind of category, but that I can't not mention to you. And speaking of sharing a microphone, the first one is Books and Things and Blatantly Bookish did a split-screen team-up discussion of The Odd Women by George Gissing, which is a terrific Victorian novel, and one of the only, in my opinion, I'm a little bit harsh on this author, but in my opinion, one of the only great novels, good novels that he wrote. Most of his novels are objectively just awful, but The Odd Women is wonderful, and their discussion is wonderful. And then also Page Nomad, Cam at Page Nomad, formerly Wolfshot Publishing, did a video called Is Wattpad Important? That's really, really good. Of course, it's funny. All of his videos are funny, but it's also really thoughtful and really interesting. Wattpad is a story sharing platform where you can upload chapter after chapter of an ongoing work. You get direct feedback from your readers. The goal, I think, is to increase your readership and become a Wattpad sensation, that sort of thing. And it's fascinating to me. I intend to write a story on Wattpad, and so this video was perfectly timed and made a lot of great points. And then the last of the BookTube Bliss, something that I've actually kind of been waiting for. I've been watching The Great on Hulu, a series about the young woman who would become Catherine the Great and her husband and decaying, decrepit Imperial Russia. And the series it has some really terrific actors doing really unusual performances for them. Nicholas Hoult especially, he plays a debauched Russian emperor, and he is doing things comic-wise in this role that I've never seen him do before. He has very good comic styling, but I've never seen it to the fore like this before. And pretty much everybody else in the show does a wonderful acting job too. But the whole time that I was watching it, the writer, the showrunners, and interviews and whatnot have said, we are not going at this page by page on a historical basis. This is a lighthearted fantasy on this subject. We are taking liberties with the historic details. They've been right up front about that right from the beginning. But even so, when I was watching this show, I can't count the number of times that I thought, or even said out loud to Frida, I wonder what Olive's going to make of this. Because I'm talking, of course, about a BookOlive, a booktuber who is all things Russian, who's been to Russia, knows it well, and knows the history really well, and has written or talked about it on her channel quite a bit. And I knew that The Great would be irresistible to her. I knew that she couldn't just let it go and not watch it. And I knew that she would have reactions to it, minute by minute, detail by detail. And I was just wondering if there would ever be such a video. And there was. There was such a video, so I will leave a link to it because it is every bit as good as I was expecting it to be. And that is just a short thumbnail of the BookTube that I watched. There are plenty of other things, but we'll get to them next week. Now we'll go out to broader YouTube, and it's a very good thing. It's something I mentioned last time. I will keep mentioning it. The Weathersfield Proctor Library, the best little library in the country. A tiny little library in a small town in Vermont that's lucky enough to have Mark Richardson of BookTube's own Richardson Reads as its library director. Of course, the Weathersfield Proctor Library, like most libraries in the country, has been shut down because of this pandemic. So nothing at all, not even curbside pickup, because of the risk it runs to employees and to patrons alike. Until those restrictions are lifted or lessened in any way, the library, like so many other libraries, has been forced to live online and try to serve and encourage and support its patrons without anything but its website. And one of the features on that has been the reading of a children's book, and this is that is the link that I'm giving you now. A wonderful, delightful reading of Goodnight Construction Site, a wonderful kids book that I'd be willing to bet that the reading will put a smile on your face. And then we'll finish up with the broader world outside of BookTube and YouTube. And like so many aspects of that broader world, this is not safe for work. Not entirely safe for work. And that is a 1,000 Movie Project. Alex from 1,000 Movie Project, who once had a BookTube channel called Kingly Endeavors, now runs he's been doing a project where he watches all of the movies in 1,000 Movies You Must See Before You Die, one of those great big books. He decided to make a marathon, multi-year project out of watching and commenting on every one of those movies. And eventually that became a podcast. And eventually the podcast broadened into all sorts of things. And eventually he floated the idea that maybe I would join him as a guest on his podcast, the very first podcast I've ever been invited to be a guest on. And I did, and we had a blast, and I did it again. So I'm going to leave a link to he sent me a link to all of the various podcast venues that you can go. I myself, ironically enough, don't listen to podcasts. So I don't know any of the differences between these venues, but he made a point of sending me a long list of them because I guess podcast consumers get them from different places and have different loyalties. This is a connection to our next conversation. It's longer than the first one. It rambles all over the place. It touches some dark subjects, but also some fun stuff. We crack each other up. This is another example of what I'm talking about, where there's a chemistry that you can't make happen. It will either be there or it won't be, and it's nice to feel it there. I look for every time we finish one of our long conversations, and he has to then embark on the enormous work of editing it down to a usable, clean, listenable format. I don't envy him. I couldn't do it myself. But every time we finish one of those conversations, I'm immediately eager to do another one. So that has to be saying something, and not just that I'm a windy old coot. It has to be saying something about the chemistry that we have between ourselves. So I thought I'd leave you links to all that free. I know a lot of you listen to podcasts. Well, now you have another one to listen to. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. That was Last Week in BookTube, and I will post this, and I will, again, I'm saying this mainly to remind myself, I will remember to leave all the links. So I will wrap this up, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.